Hi, this is Chris Collins bringing you another installment from my Agile Whiteboard video series. Today we will be discussing the Scrum Framework. Scrum is an agile process framework for developing software. It is a user-centered process that focuses on delivering valuable software early and often. The development in Scrum occurs in 1 to 4 week time-boxed iterations called sprints. Inputs from the users, stakeholders, and the team feed into the development of the product backlog. The product backlog is a prioritized list of user stories that describe the capabilities from the end user's perspective that need to be turned into working software. In Scrum, the product backlog replaces the software requirement specification, or SRS, that we used in traditional methods, though it is not at the same level of detail or formality that you would typically find in an SRS. The product owner is the first of 3 roles in the Scrum process that we will discuss. The product owner owns the product vision. The product owner's job is to maintain the product backlog. It is the job of the product owner to prioritize the backlog and ensure the development team is always working on the capabilities that will bring the most value to the warfighter. Backlog refinement is the activity where the product owner collaborates with the users, stakeholders, and the development team to prioritize user stories, split large user stories or epics to the appropriate level of detail, and add new user stories. Backlog refinement needs to be a routine activity that occurs on a periodic basis throughout the lifetime of the project to ensure that sprint planning can occur smoothly. The product backlog feeds the sprint planning activity. During sprint planning, the team gets together and determines which highest priority items from the product backlog they believe they can get done during the sprint, and those items become the sprint backlog. The sprint backlog is the team's plan for directing the current sprint's execution. The team will estimate the user stories they are considering for the sprint. A common way Scrum teams estimate is called planning poker. Planning poker is a wideband Delphi technique for estimating. In planning poker, the teams are using story points to develop a relative sizing estimate for each user story. Typical planning poker decks roughly follow the Fibonacci sequence of values: 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, etc. Velocity is the metric Scrum teams use to know how much work to plan each sprint. Velocity is determined by adding up the story point values for all the user stories the team completed in the previous sprint. By tracking velocity, the team can gauge how much work they can reasonably accomplish during the next sprint. It is important for the team to work at a sustainable pace so that they do not accrue technical debt and can maintain the quality of the code base they are developing. The team will select as many of the highest priority user stories that add up to their velocity. During the time-boxed 1 to 4 week sprint, the sprint backlog will be turned into working software. The development team is the second of the 3 roles in the Scrum framework that we will look at. The development team owns the execution and the delivery. The development team is a self-organizing, cross-functional team that is responsible for turning the sprint backlog into potentially shippable software at the end of each sprint. Self-organizing means the development team is in charge of determining how the technical work will be accomplished. Cross-functional means that they have all the expertise needed to turn the backlog into working software. Each day the team meets in a set location and time for the daily scrum. During the daily scrum, each team member will answer 3 questions. What did I work on yesterday? What am I going to work on today? And are there any impediments keeping me from accomplishing my work? The Scrum Master is the third of the 3 roles in the Scrum process that we will discuss. The Scrum Master owns the process vision. The Scrum Master is the coach to ensure that the development team and the product owner understands the process and their roles inside the process. The Scrum Master is there to help remove impediments that may be keeping the development team from accomplishing their work. The Sprint Burndown chart is another metric that the Scrum Master and the team uses to track progress. Often the Sprint Burndown will be displayed in the team area so the team can see how the sprint is progressing. The Sprint Burndown chart shows the ideal burndown of the work over the duration of the sprint. If the remaining work is above the trend line, the team knows they are behind, and if the remaining work is below the trend line, the team knows they are ahead of the sprint plan. The output of each sprint is potentially shippable software that meets the team's definition of done. The software may not be delivered to the field each sprint, but the idea is that the software at the end of each sprint is in a state that it could be shipped to end users. The definition of done is a checklist that covers all the activities that must be complete in order for a user story to be marked as completed by the development team. Some typical items that you will find in a definition of done are things like all the unit tests pass at 100%, the code builds without any errors or warnings, the code has been peer reviewed, etc. The team will develop a definition of done that will guide their activities and help ensure they are developing a quality product at the end of each sprint. At the end of each sprint, the team comes together to demonstrate the working software that was produced during the sprint. If possible, teams want to include end users in the sprint review so they can get feedback into what they produced and make sure they are building the product the users need. The sprint review is a feedback point that allows the team to make course corrections to ensure they are headed in the right direction with the product they are developing. It is also an opportunity to ensure that the money expended is providing the value expected. One of the principles in the Agile Manifesto is working software is the primary measure of progress. The sprint review serves as a checkpoint to measure that progress. The last principle in the Agile Manifesto states, at regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective, then tunes and adjusts its behavior accordingly. The sprint retrospective done at the end of each sprint is how Scrum teams accomplish this principle. At the end of each sprint, the team evaluates the process and what worked and didn't work during the last sprint. They determine how they are going to change their process after each sprint to improve it. It is a mechanism for bottom-up process improvement to ensure the team is operating as efficiently and effectively as possible. The team will continue to repeat this process as long as there are capabilities in the product backlog that the users need. The software capabilities will grow with each increment of software delivered at the end of each sprint. In summary, Scrum is made up of 5 events. These events are the time box sprint, sprint planning, daily Scrum, sprint review, and sprint retrospective. The framework identifies 3 roles for accomplishing the work: product owner, development team, and Scrum Master. Collectively, these 3 roles are known as the Scrum team. The process produces 3 artifacts: product backlog, sprint backlog, and the done software. The 2 most common metrics used to guide the process is the team's velocity and the sprint burn down chart.